The following presentation may cause confusion, anxiety, and/or outrage. It may be considered blasphemy or heresy when viewed by conventional physics. Please see your physicist if these symptoms persist. Since the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics disagree with each other, either one or both are wrong or incomplete, I think it is time for a new model of the universe. Hopefully, the two theories can be resolved and unified to give us a better understanding of the universe. When he was in school in the 15th century, everything Copernicus was taught about the motion of planets and stars was wrong. When Isaac Newton was in school in the 17th century, everything they taught him about gravity and mass acceleration was wrong. When you were in school in the 20th century, everything you were taught about time and the speed of light was wrong. As recently as the middle 1900s, it was thought that airplanes could never fly faster than the speed of sound. They were misinformed. Down through history, most of science has been reluctant to declare that the emperor has no clothes or to dispute a generally accepted theory from such a great authority, until someone comes up with an experiment or a definitive observation to refute or disprove that theory. Let's define speed first. We recognize that distances are always measured from one point, point A, to another point, point B. This is true whether the distance is medium from you to the door, or small from one character on a page to the next, or the extremely small from an electron to the nucleus of an atom. This also holds true if the distance is very large from one galaxy to another. Distances are always measured in relative terms. Speed is the amount of time it takes to travel the distance from point A to point B. Since distances are relative values, speed is also relative, whether it is speed relative to the surface of the Earth in your car or speed of the Milky Way galaxy to the Andromeda galaxy. Since all speeds are measured in relative terms, let's examine the speeds of the galaxies shown. If observers in Galaxy Z look at Galaxy X, they will observe a relative speed of 3/4 times the speed of light. This is perfectly fine with Einstein's E equals mc squared equation. They will also observe that Galaxy Y is behaving itself. However, observers in galaxies X and Y have a relative or closing speed of 1.5 times the speed of light. In Einstein's court, this is somehow a violation of the laws of physics. Objects moving at faster than light speeds would not be detectable by optical or electronic means, just as detecting a supersonic jet is not acoustically possible until its acoustical shock wave or sonic boom has passed you. In this example, observers in Galaxy X and Galaxy Y would be unable to detect each other visually or electronically, but that fact doesn't prevent their relative closing speed from exceeding the speed of light. One doesn't have to look back very far to remember that prior to Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier, the limit of speed was thought to be the speed of sound. The limitations of our detection techniques don't exclude the possibility of exceeding light speed any more than the speed of sound is a limit of jet airplanes. If you ask any physicist trained in today's conventional wisdom, they will tell you nothing can move faster than the speed of light. But let's use one of Dr. Einstein's thought experiments for another insight into speed. If you examine the CERN Large Hadron Collider, LHC, you may be told the protons used in the research there are accelerated to about 0.999999991 c, almost the speed of light. Now, as we all know, this is a speed measured from a fixed point on the surface of the Earth. If you were riding on one of those protons, you would agree with that speed estimate. If you were riding on one of the protons running in the opposing ring at the same speed, you would also agree with that speed estimate. But when those two rings of protons are steered into a collision path, the closing relative speed of the two protons would be closer to twice the speed of light. Since we are only able to observe these speeds visually or electronically, you would never see the opposing proton coming and never know what hit you. Much the same as two supersonic airplanes would never acoustically hear the other plane approaching in opposition. So we leave it up to you as to how the speeds are to be measured and what frame of reference for that measurement is most accurate. One outgrowth of Einstein's theory of relativity is called the twin paradox. This is the predicted idea that if one twin was to go blasting out into space at near the speed of light, his or her time would be slowed down compared to the twin remaining on Earth. When the first twin returns and the two siblings are reunited, they would have experienced drastically different ages due to time dilation. Can there be a better example of a parochial geocentered theory anywhere? This concept totally ignores the fact that distance and speed are measured in relative values. Most, if not all, physicists acknowledge that everything is in relative motion: planets, stars, galaxies. So there is no real point of origin or absolute zero reference. Distances are measured from one point relative to another. Speed is also measured in relative terms from one object to the other. This means that the two twins, when reunited, have each traveled half the relative distance and returned half the relative distance. Since each twin travels the same relative distance over the same amount of time, there can be no time dilation effect. When the twins are reunited, their relative net distance traveled is zero, which would cancel out any possible dilation effect. The twin paradox is based on the premise that one twin is at a fixed location, Earth, and the other twin is moving. Relativity can only be valid when you keep everything relative, including distances and speeds. Absolute speed is a human perception, not a physical phenomenon. We must ask ourselves, is it reasonable or logical to impose an absolute limit on a quantity that is measured in relative values? So it is never a good idea to throw stones at another's idea unless you have an alternative answer to the question. There is no doubt that Professor Einstein recognized the intimate relationship between mass and time. Einstein, however, believed the nature of time to be a scalar quantity or dimension, directly measurable like height, width, and depth. He referred to time along with three-dimensional space, calling them space-time. Einstein predicted that the motion of a massive object creates a distortion in the curvature of space-time. He referred to this distortion phenomenon as time dilation. His misunderstanding of the nature of time required the introduction of a number of theoretical phenomena, such as reverse time travel and causality loops. He was, like many early astronomers, trying to fit a circular peg into an elliptical hole. Prior to Isaac Newton defining the laws of motion and the relationship between mass and gravitational attraction, man dealt with gravity, knew it exists, and considered it a dimension, or universal constant. It doesn't take too much imagination to consider how much ridicule Newton must have endured from his contemporaries when they found out he is out playing with gravity again. Everyone knows about gravity. What is this new concept of mass, and how does it relate to gravity? Surely he is wasting his time with something everyone is so familiar with. We are also familiar with the trouble Christopher Columbus had convincing the leaders of Europe that the world is not flat. The magnetic force and the electric force combine to create the electromagnetic force duo. They are bipolar by nature in that the magnetic force has poles, north and south, and the electric force has positive and negative charges. Time is in reality a member of another symmetric force duo, combining with the force of gravity and originating from objects with mass, or more specifically the nucleus of the atom. We experience the gravitational vector force exerted by mass as an acceleration force that we refer to as weight when we are at rest. Time is a vector force containing direction and magnitude, but always flowing outward from the present to what we refer to as the future, measurable only by observing its effect on the physical objects around us. Both forces are monopolar and originate from the nucleus of the atom, gravity pointing inward, while time always flows outward. We experience time, which I'm going to refer to as the ChronoForce, as another vector force exerted by mass. Time magnitude flows faster in orbit than on the surface of the Earth, and directionally always points into what we refer to as the future, never into the past. The predicted distortion of Einstein's space-time continuum is the interaction of the ChronoForce combined with gravitational force. ChronoForce is variable and changes with conditions such as proximity to other objects with mass. Just as we cannot directly measure gravitational force, but only its effect on objects with mass, and EMF by its effects on conductors, semiconductors, and magnetic fields, we cannot directly measure ChronoForce. Only its effect on moving objects in motion like flywheels, tuning rods, and oscillators. We are as oblivious to the variability of ChronoForce today as were the scientists of the 14th century to the variability of the force of gravity. Today, we orbit a spherical globe in minutes. Today, we have precise weights and measures, which standardize our measurements of mass in the Earth's gravitational field. Today, we also know gravity is a variable force depending on this mass. A mass that weighs 10 pounds on Earth will weigh substantially less on the Moon or substantially more on Jupiter. Weight depends on the gravitational field or mass of the frame reference. Our standards of time measurement, like the atomic clock, operate with great precision here on the surface of the Earth in our ChronoForce field of reference. We haven't begun to explore how it acts outside of our astronomical backyard. Science has already observed that these extremely precise clocks run faster at the top of a mountain than those at sea level. It is also no accident that we have to adjust the precision clocks in GPS satellites to run slightly slower on the Earth's surface in order to compensate for the increased distance they operate from the center of the Earth's mass when they are in orbit. In December of 2006, Ephraim Fishbach and Jerry Jenkins of Purdue University uncovered a mystery that up until this point has not been explained by traditional physics theory. A variation in nuclear decay rates was found to correlate with an annual variation recognized as varying with apogee or aphelion and perigee or perihelion, which is the distance from the Sun in our elliptical orbit. The proximity to the Sun's concentration of ChronoForce is what we suspect causes the predictable annual variations in nuclear decay rates. Conventional science is still wrestling with the fact that atomic decay rates differ as our orbital distance from the Sun's center of gravity changes. This is seasonal due to Earth's elliptical orbit, same as we adjust the GPS clocks to compensate for the distance from the Earth's center. We haven't fully defined the properties of ChronoForce or how it affects other objects. Our current understanding of time is like man's knowledge of gravity prior to Isaac Newton joining the concept of mass attraction and acceleration with gravitational force. We know time exists, but until now have had no idea from where it originates or how it behaves in other frames of reference. So how do we know the variation in time passage isn't due to the greater radial speed at the top of the mountain? Radial speed at the equator is 1,650 kilometers per hour, while the radial speed at the poles is 0. Atomic clocks run the same at sea level. They do not vary with latitude, so radial speed cannot be a factor. Thanks for watching this presentation about the ChronoForce hypothesis Part 1. Please consider viewing Part 2 of this presentation. For more information on the subject, visit www.chronoforce.com.